Thank you. Okay. Um, the other day, as I do so often, I spent a quality evening out on the ocean, which is a weird way to start a presentation, not only because how is that relevant to this topic, but also because the boat in question is a three-mast galley, all wood, no engine. And I think the more perceptive of you have now gathered that I'm actually talking about a video game. Specifically, I'm talking about Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves is a pirate game. That means you're doing what a pirate does. You're sailing out to sea, you're digging up loot, and then you try to sell it before something bad happens to you. This is one way of playing the game, though. You can play it another way as well. You can go sail out to sea. You can find another crew who has just dug out treasure, and you can steal their hard-earned loot from them and then hope nothing bad happens on the way back home. We, in my crew, are more of the peaceful sort. We like to dress ourselves up. We like to dress our ships up. We like to dress our pets up. And then we like to sing sea shanties and just go out and dig up some loot, go on some adventures. Which sounds boring, but we do have really interesting stories to tell. And I think those stories derive from a third style of playing the game. So the other day I was out on sea. We were again doing what pirates do. We go out to sea. We dug up a bunch of treasure. We had our whole ship loaded with loot. And then inevitably it happened and another crew saw us and found us easy prey. And so they started to chase us. They thought we were easy prey, but they hadn't considered that we really thrived, not only thrived, but excelled at this one particular style of playing the game. We call it the Great Escape. Trademark. You see, we're not really peaceful by choice. We're just really shit at combat. But what we are good at is patience and wit and some sort of endurance and innovation about how to trick other players who want to steal loot from us. So when this crew tried to steal the loot from us, what we did was we sailed around the map a bunch, left and right, up and down, much to the dismay of our chasers, I must say. And when they finally caught up to us, they looked at our ship and, oh, what's that? There's no loot anymore. What happened was 30 minutes before that, one of my crew members had secretly loaded all the loot back into the rowboat that was attached to our ship. In a moment when the other crew wasn't watching, detached that rowboat and then calmly and peacefully sailed to the next outpost to sell all the loot that we have gathered. So while our crew was just running around the map and the other crew chasing our ship, this one crew member just calmly sold all the loot. We had all the cash. Win for us. Not only win for us because we got all the money, but for us, this is a win because we got all the money in style. And some of you will have guessed that this is not a very popular style of playing the game. We are we're not infrequently labeled as cowards in this sort of style of playing, or an in-game term is running reapers, for instance. But the fact is that after 5 years of playing the game this way, and countless updates, countless new contents added to the game, new strategies, new weapons added to the game, new mechanics, it still works. We can still play the game this way. And not only that, but this dialogue about how to play the game, whether this is a cowardly style of playing, that is continuing to this day. That was true on day one. It's true today. This is dialogue created inside the game. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, by design. Because nothing escapes a game developer who works on a live service game for years and years on end, for thousands of hours. And especially not if there's one player base who likes to run away and the other player base who doesn't like to chase them. This is not a bug that hasn't been fixed yet. This is intentionally left in the game to ultimately create this dialogue because those game developers are so fantastic at creating this dialogue. And we see this dialogue happening in other titles as well. This is a hallmark of successful live service titles, but also of just longevity in titles. In Battlefield, players will to this day argue about whether or not it's okay to mow other players down with a quad, especially if that quad is on the 4th floor of a multi-story building. In Skyrim, there's ongoing discussions about whether it's best to play the game killing all the people or none of the people. And there's a never-ending moral discussion in Baldur's Gate whether or not it's okay to have sexual relations with a druid who can turn into a bear. The question, though, then for me, or the interesting question for me is, if game developers are so good at creating these dialogues around different topics, around how to play the game, about moral questions, why then are we not seeing games that have this dialogue about the topic of futures in a hopeful and optimistic and actionable way? Why is there no futures dialogue by design? And that's what I want to try and answer, at least offer one answer that I have to this question during the remainder of this talk. And maybe also a proposal on how we could fix that a little bit. This is where I introduce myself. My name is Matthes. I'm a futurist who happens to work in the games industry, who also happens to be a really shit shot in Sea of Thieves. And I thank you all for being here for my little therapy session. I'm personally super interested in understanding the stories that people tell each other, whether it be in games or outside, about what the future should look like or what futures can look like. And I'm also interested in asking the question of what kind of processes or structures do we need to design in society, in different contexts, to make sure that these dialogues are happening more often. I do a bit of research with a Horizon EU project called Strategies. You will hear a little more about that in a second after my talk. I teach courses at Bonn University on futures literacy and career orientation. I sometimes make a little bit of art, and I work in the games industry for a company called Spielfabrik, where we try to help game developers to become more resilient. And during that work specifically, we found out a couple of things that I would like to share with you. For context, most of you who work in the games industry will know the games industry hasn't been doing too well in the last year or two. This is a graph that shows the merger and acquisitions without the Activision Blizzard merger during 2018 to 2023. And you can see the line is really dipping down after 2021. We have seen tons of studios closing their doors. We have seen budget cuts, tons of layoffs. We've seen publishing houses closing doors. And in the follow-up to that, a lot of indies having to close down as well. We have seen even public funds kind of fizzle out, or some public funds closing. And all of this is happening also in an industry where it's anyways really hard to stand out right now with a new title on the market, just because the number of titles year over year is increasing, ever increasing. So of course, the ones that are hit the hardest are the young and coming developers. Right now, as like with the Spielfabrik hat on, with this advisory hat on, we are often telling developers, your first game's not only not going to make it, but there's not going to be a publisher out there for you to sign that game. And even our mentors and our advisors in our company often also recommend even senior studios to not even, think about publishing with a publisher, just go with a self-publishing route. If you're lucky, somebody will see that and will jump on board because you're just doing so well already on your own. So if we cannot give that hope right now to studios oftentimes, then it's really no surprise that game developers themselves are really, really in despair about their own future in the games industry. And I think that, for me, is one of the answers to the question of why there are no futures dialogue games out there right now, because the developers themselves are just not as optimistic and hopeful. But in this very, very hostile environment, we have seen a couple of exceptions that I want to share with you. We've seen studios that are innovative and creative in how they approach business and how they approach their own role in the industry, and that are just trying something new from time to time. This is a company, they're called T-Play, they're from Turkey, now sitting in Germany. They had a hard time signing their mobile game at first until they ran into BMW, who signed with them a contract on doing in-car entertainment with their mobile game. This is another company, they're called Charles Games, sitting in the Czech Republic, and they're building amazing mobile games, but commissioned from NGOs and other public or public near institutions on social issues that they want to cover. And this is another European studio, they're called Draw Distance, and they're collaborating with an African studio to collaboratively create a game, share the IP, and thus tap into a completely new market. These are 3 examples. We have tons of more examples if we really start digging. There's studios who go into the wildest collaboration with AI companies to test their models inside the game. There's companies who go into the adult entertainment industry to co-finance the game that they're doing outside of the adult entertainment industry. So there's like a lot of like weird and wacky ideas that are floating around. But what connects all of these people, all of these developers, is a quality that we call in futures literacy. These developers understand why and how they can use their ideas about the future to prepare, plan, and interact with the complexity and novelty of their everyday professional lives as game developers. And it's a little bit of a chicken or egg sort of question, but we see this quality correlate with other qualities that we see in those devs. Devs that are futures literate, we see to be more hopeful in general. They're not as affected by the doom and gloom narratives that are currently surrounding them in the industry. They hold an idealism about their own work, but pair that and negotiate that with an opportunism that is really healthy, that allows them to see new ideas pop up and new opportunities pop up, and to make use of them without losing their sense of self. They have a learner's mindset, which is really useful if you have to deviate from the current narrative of like, you create a game, you find a publisher, you publish it, and that's it. And that doesn't work anymore. What do you do then? And the learner's mindset really helps them. And the last thing is that they're really humble, to the point where we sometimes have to tell them that they're successful because they themselves will not acknowledge that. Case in point, T-Play, the studio that I showed you with the BMW sign, they initially thought that this contract that they signed with BMW was just a second choice, like a last resort sort of solution. They were innovators in what they wanted to do, and they didn't even realize that. But there is innovative potential, and we want to kind of harvest that potential, and that's why at Spielfabrik we created a program. It's called Edge, where we foster futures literacy in studios, foster resilience in studios, and let the studios together create a community of those innovators. We do that through workshops, so they meet with change managers, with business developers, with successful studios in the industry, but also with futures and foresight practitioners to better understand what they can do. They have one-on-one mentoring. That's something that we really believe in Spielfabrik, at Spielfabrik. It's, for us, mentoring is kind of like therapy for a professional context. It's really useful because we also believe in therapy generally. And we give them peer-to-peer support, and that's something that we've seen work the most with developers, is that if they talk to each other, that's some of the most impactful learning experience that they will have inside these programs. And the idea is that those developers ultimately become champions of hope, the drivers of futures literacy, in their own teams, in their professional communities, but also outside of that, and hopefully towards the player base that they're catering to. We're hoping that they create these games that become stages of dialogue about what the future should look like. And there are still, of course, some questions that we need to answer. For instance, the question, will developers really be interested in creating these games and not just another Fallout, another doom and gloom apocalypse game? We believe that the answer to that should be yes, not only because we believe in it ideologically, but also because we see that the gamers are already there. gamers want to play games that make them imagine new things and that lets them explore these new ideas about what the world should look like together. So if you're as hopeful as us, then maybe we should talk, because my personal hope then is that at some point in the future, I will not have to run away from other pirate players anymore, but instead I can have games where I approach other people and I live in their future and they live in mine. And if that is possible, then I think games have a very incredible potential to become the biggest place in the world where we write the stories of tomorrow. Thank you.